So welcome, Zac.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. It's such an well, I'm going to say amazing story. We're certainly not going to glorify drugs and alcohol, and but very few people, get to come out the other side and be able to not only tell their story but be able to share with others. Not to do it. So it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, so it's my pleasure. So, Zac, we heard in the intro, that you got into drugs and alcohol, you had an accident, ended up in jail, hurt several people, came out the other side, and now you're, helping other people. But before all of that stuff happened, who were you as a kid? Like, were you a happy kid or were you a troubled kid?
Look, I mean, I talk about it in my book a fair bit that like I came from a pretty good home, and a loving family. But yeah, I don't know, as I grew up and certain external influences kind of started to affect me, I kind of became really quite a sad, quite lost kid and teenager. And I think that's probably where the drugs really started. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, when I was younger, I was a very happy kid. Yeah.
I've talked to quite a few people that have ended up in drug addiction and come out the other side, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be talking to them, because they probably wouldn't be here. It's a very lucky situation to make it. But sadness is a really prominent emotion,
Absolutely.
underneath that sort of thing. Yeah. And like you say, it can just be triggered by any environmental factor, and we all interpret emotions differently. We all feel things differently, or at least interpret the situation differently and feel the emotions differently. But sadness sits there quite solidly. So what was it that I don't know, why did you think drugs was a good solution? How did that happen?
Um, when I was young, it was just I was looking for anything to just make me feel different. And I didn't really pay enough attention or do enough work on myself, if that makes sense. I mean,
Yep.
They teach it now, but when I was at school, they didn't teach like mindfulness, and they didn't really explain what emotional well-being was and mental health was when I was young, or maybe I just didn't pay attention. But yeah, and I was kind of this neurotic, like hyperactive kid. I mean, it's just who I am. I'm a very high energy person. And so my highs are really high, but my lows are also like really, really low. And I think that when, when 14, 15-year-old me kind of was going through all these states of heightened emotion, and I found weed, for example, and instantly, like, my mind would stop racing and I could actually just chill out and not think and not always be thinking. I latched onto it pretty fast, because it pretty much straight away disconnected me from all those emotions and all that hyperactivity. And I'd never really had too many discussions about drug use and about how drugs affect your mental health and stuff like that. So as soon as I found marijuana, as an example, I latched onto it because of how it made me feel, not knowing that it's not actually helping what I'm going through. I wasn't in my head. It's like, oh yeah, well, cool. If I smoke weed, then I'm not depressed, or I'm not sad, or I don't hate myself, or whatever. And I didn't realize that quite quickly I was developing a habit, pretty much from the get-go.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? People start with weed and then they're like, well, it's not really doing me any harm. You know, it makes me feel great. And I think that before anybody hits pause or stop on this episode and thinks, oh, I might go do that because it'll make me feel good, please don't, because the effects that it does have on your mental health and the effects that it can have on you overall, your well-being, is absolutely dreadful. So that moment of joy isn't worth the long-term effects. So.
Look, I had and I have friends that even still to this day smoke dope, and I have watched them progress from like really energetic, charismatic people, and it's just, I have watched it like really dull them down. They don't go out as much. They don't have as much energy. They're always tired. They've lost that drive and motivation for life. And I think that people tend to rationalize weed as, oh, it's just a bit of weed, but it's actually not. It's a really it's a really powerful depressant,
Yeah. So during that time, so like when you started taking weed, and then it obviously progressed to much heavier drugs, and then the time that you had the accident, went to jail, in that time, did anybody try to pull you off the journey? Like, were you hiding this, or was it obvious to people and they were trying to stop you? Or
it's impossible to hide something that you're so actively pursuing and engaged in. And look, my mum and my parents are always very attentive. So there was nothing that I could hide from. I could try and hide it, but they'd always find out. And I think, really honestly, part of me didn't really care. I mean, when I was growing up, the rule of the house was there's no drugs in the house, and if you don't want to abide by that rule, then you have to leave. And I quite happily left. So I mean, I think that speaks volumes. But so, yeah, I think. I would say that I actively pursued it.
Yeah. Did they talk to you about it and say, Zac, you this is going to ruin your life? What are you doing?
Absolutely. And a lot of people tried to help me. I think when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, unless somebody wants to change and wants to help themselves. There's absolutely nothing you can do.
Yeah.
And this is in a lot of my presentations and a lot of my public speaking. I say that a lot, but I also have to remind myself a lot, because like I meet some incredible people, like some incredible young blokes, even just, in everyday passings, you meet people that you really want to help. And because I do really want to help people, and I don't want to see, young blokes go down the same path that I went down. But unfortunately, I do have to remind myself sometimes that you can't always help people unless they want to be helped. And unfortunately, there was, despite all the people that did try and steer me in the right direction, I was pretty set on going down one path.
Yeah, which ended up being a tragic path, and very, very lucky that nobody was killed, because that would have been a completely different outcome for you now. And like, just lucky. I'll say one fateful night, you decided to get behind the wheel, completely wrapped up in drugs and alcohol, and just with a car full of people, and injured multiple people. So take us back to that night.
So I finished work one Friday night, and unfortunately the lead up to this night had been, was a month, 2 months, 3 months, like could have even been, a year in the making, unfortunately. So there was a culture within my friendship circle that we would get together on the weekend and just get as drunk as possible and just really write ourselves off. And I think it's a pretty normal culture these days, unfortunately, especially with my generation in drinking. And so anyway, I finished work and I got a message from my friend saying, hey, we're going to a comedy show tonight. Do you want to come? And, long story short, we went to that comedy show. It was good. We had a few drinks while we were there. I drove us all back to my place. And pretty much while we were on the way home, we kind of already really committed ourselves to pushing it pretty far that night. We were joking about it in the car on the way home, saying that, oh, we're going to get smashed and everything like that. And so when we got home, we really just attacked it. So we were smoking weed, we passed around bongs, and we were just drinking recklessly, so a few beers pretty quickly turned into a few shots, and then a few shots resulted in us really just sculling straight liquor. And so naturally we went through, I think there were like about 3 bottles that night, and we went through them pretty fast. And yeah, so me and at the time, or sorry, me and the passenger who ended up being in the car in the front passenger seat, we were just taking turns sculling from a bottle of vodka, just back and forward. And that was the last bottle of alcohol. And he said to me, oh, we should go to the all-night bottle shop and get more. And I had my keys in my pocket, and I just wasn't thinking. And so it was about 30 seconds between me sculling a bottle of vodka and getting in a car. And so I was already drunk, but that alcohol hadn't even hit my system yet. And so me and my friend, we got in the car, and as I was pulling out of the driveway, 3 of our friends got in the back, and because they wanted to come with us to get more alcohol. And as I was pulling out of the drive, I actually backed into a car that was parked across the street. And I say it a lot, like that should have been the absolute biggest indication that I should not be behind the wheel. I feel like that was like the world giving me one more chance to just pull back into the driveway and just sleep it off, which I did not. And so I pulled out onto the highway and began driving, and I already was swerving lanes and couldn't really see straight. But then all of that alcohol that I just sculled really started to hit me. And I lost all sense of direction. I lost any ability to regulate my speed or, control my vehicle safely. And yeah, so I was speeding, and I was swerving lanes, and I had no idea where I was going. My front passenger pulled up his phone to give me directions, and we'd driven to this bottle shop a lot. So, I should have known where it was. But again, I was just too beside myself. And so my passenger was trying to read me the directions. Again, he was incredibly intoxicated as well, and he couldn't read the directions on his phone. So I looked down for a split second at his phone, or what felt like a split second. And when I looked up, I wasn't on the road anymore, and I was flying towards a brick wall. And everything went black after that. And yeah, the car crashed. The car ran off the road down an embankment, actually, and it was a 4-wheel drive. It was a pretty big car. It managed to fit between a power pole and a tree.
Wow.
And so we went through this brick wall, rolled, and then the brick wall was around like a retirement village type thing. And so the car went through the brick wall and through a car park, missed every car. Like not even a brick hit one of the other cars. It was just so strange. The car rolled several times, landed pretty much on its roof, caught fire. And yeah, kind of, we were all stuck in the car. My foot was pinned. My front passenger was pinned in the car really badly. He had to be cut out of the car. Our friends in the back were all sustained, different injuries, head injuries. One had a fractured vertebrae, so was very nearly paralyzed. And it was just, someone was actually driving past with a fire extinguisher in their car and actually put the fire out.
Wow.
And yeah, so my friend had to be cut out of the car, and like it was it was a horrifying experience. I mean, I wouldn't be able to live with myself had someone have passed away that night. And just the thought of it alone is very, very traumatizing, I guess you would say. Because it was just a sheer miracle. While I was in jail, you know, I'd watch the news pretty much every night, and it happens almost on a weekly basis. I don't know if I just became more aware of it or it's happening more. You know, young blokes drink driving, or just people drink driving. And I saw countless crashes that were half as bad as mine where people died. And that's a really, really harrowing reality.
Yeah.
And so the next day I woke up in hospital, and, you know, I was asking nurses and doctors, you know, where are my friends? How is everyone? And the lack of answers was very scary. They said, look, as far as we know, everyone's alive. Some of them are in a pretty bad state. But we were all at different hospitals. So, yeah, I mean, just that fear of not knowing the state that everyone was in was absolutely terrifying. And unfortunately, like, it was a mix of guilt and knowing that I'd really fucked up. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but like at this point, like that was my reality. And so, you know, even that wasn't enough of a wake up call for me to really turn my life around, or maybe like it was, because I mean, I have turned my life around since then. But in the time between my car crash and going to jail, I really only slipped further off the edge of the mountain, off the edge of the world, and just abused drugs and abused myself. And, you know, whether through guilt or just, you know, just being really addicted, I just I really checked out.
Wow. How long was it before you went to jail after the accident?
Actually about 18 months. So I was probably about 3 weeks after the crash, police asked me to come in, and I went in and was interviewed and formally charged, and I was bailed. And then there were hearings and a bunch of different, because it was in the county court, and so there was a bunch of due process. But yeah, so the 30th of May 2019, 30th of May 2019, I was sentenced to 4 years 9 months.
Wow. What went through your mind when you were like, far out, I'm going to jail?
I mean, at the time, it's like a death sentence. It just, I suppose because I was young, and yeah, I mean, 4 years 9 months just sounds like forever. And so when, I mean, so I had my friends and family were in attendance of my sentencing, and they were all incredibly emotional. Like, my mum was just bawling her eyes out at the front of the courtroom, which we write about in the book Why the Fallen. And probably I held it together a lot better because she was there. I really kept the poker face because she was suffering enough, and I figured if I don't show that it affects me, it might not be as painful for her. So I was really more focused on her at that point. But yeah, like, you know, in the few days after that sentencing, where you're sitting in a jail cell and you're thinking 4 years 9 months, it's just like soul crushing. It is like the biggest weight on your shoulder.
Wow, I can imagine. Do you think you obviously experienced remorse, you know, and I wish I hadn't done it, and you talked about that earlier, you know, guilt and I fucked up and that. Do you think, were you thinking more about remorse like that remorse for being caught, or remorse for putting innocent lives at risk?
Well, and this is the thing, when you're young and dumb, you don't understand how your actions have consequences for other people. And what I mean by that is people who are not involved in your choices, or people who have done nothing wrong suffering the consequences of your actions. And so I'm not specifically talking about the people that were in my car that night, because whilst they were affected by my actions, you know, we all got in the car, we were all drunk. But my loved ones and their loved ones, as an example, they did nothing wrong. And so I don't think, I just, being young and dumb and obviously being intoxicated, you don't think about consequences for other people.
Yeah. How did it impact your family? Like, you said that your mum was like a mess in the court, but what did it do to her spirit, her soul?
I mean, that was the thing. It was like, you know, we had already pretty much been estranged for a while, because of my drug use and because I continuously was going off the rails. That had really driven a wedge between me and my mum, but she's my mum. She absolutely adores me. And so when I was getting sentenced to jail, I mean, she was just, it just crushed her. And it didn't end there. I mean, my mum did my sentence with me in her own way. And it's, I mean, the harshest punishment that anyone gets is felt by the people around those who have been put in jail. And it's really like a common theme that people trying to support people in jail and stuff, like, their lives are on pause. And so that's not as well known, but my mum did every day of my sentence with me, 912 days. So it was pretty hard for her.
And I think that I was about to ask you, did you ever think it would happen to you?
No, I genuinely didn't, and that's that teenage thing of, 10 foot tall and bulletproof, it'll never happen to me. And I had this, like, just really confronting moment where, growing up, you watched those Drink Drive, you bloody idiot commercials, and there was one where a guy drank drove, and then he crashed his car, and they pulled him out of his car and laid him next to his dead girlfriend. And he just, like, cried and screamed, "What have I done? I didn't mean to do this." And I had that exact moment. They laid me down next to one of my unconscious passengers, and I'll never forget how terrified I was. And I don't know if I said it out loud or to myself, but, like, what have I done? And it never won't affect me. But I did think, it will never happen to me. And I mean, I hear it and see it all the time, and it's just like, no, it'll never happen to you until it does. And when it does, it's, like, bad. It's really bad.
It's like when you talk, saying about the consequences of your mum, having to do that sentence with you the whole time. And it's and I don't think there's very many people on this planet that would go, I don't care if I go to jail and some shit happens to me, I hope everyone around me suffers. There's very few people that actually think like that. But I think the root cause is we just never think it'll happen to us. So while we would not want to inflict that pain on those we care about, deliberately, we just think, well, it's never going to happen because, I'm so bloody, particularly young men are so sure of themselves.
Consequential thinking is something that I suppose we should focus more, especially towards young males, because they don't particularly have the best common sense on a good day with the wind behind them. They're really, we are quite beef-headed. And consequential thinking is is a really important thing, and it's something that I think we lack.
It's men's brains, and I can't remember the exact ages and that, but their neocortex, their complex thinking actually doesn't really develop properly until early 20s, something like that. And
25, yeah.
25, yeah. So it's like we are asking the impossible, and yet we still give keys and alcohol. We make that available to people that are not fully functional with their thinking. But I think that, I remember Bethesda, which is the brain injury, they treat brain injuries and that sort of stuff. It's a rehab center for car accidents, and it's filled with young men. And my brother-in-law was in there for, several months. And I remember a time when they used to take HSC, whatever, year 12 students in there, and used to make them be confronted by this, by people that with brain injury, and that actually had quite an impact. And I don't know if they still do it or not, but I think that you can't tell young men this is going to happen, that could happen, because there's no way, they're not even listening. But I think when they see it in person, really see it, I think that has an impact.
Absolutely. I think that, it's not, the aim isn't to scare people straight, but showing people the end result is incredibly powerful. I mean, my mum talks about when she was in school, they showed her this anti-drug video about this like 16-year-old girl. She was beautiful, she had a really bright future, and then they showed her like after 6 months of like heroin use, for example, and she died, and so they showed all these photos as she progressed over this 6-month period. And she talks about that a lot, like that scared the absolute hell out of her. And I have a very dear friend, Melissa McGuinness, from You Choose Youth Road Safety. And so she does presentations up in schools in Queensland, and we're trying to get her down here to Melbourne. But her son, Jordan, did exactly what I did, but he died and killed 4 people. And so she does presentations now to schools, and it's probably one of the most powerful presentations that I've seen. She showed it to me, and I cried several times. And what she does is she shows people the impacts that our actions have on our loved ones, and from the side of a mother who's lost her son, and that's incredibly powerful. And that's the kind of message that gets people thinking. And yeah, I think when people see the finished product, it becomes a lot more real. Like, oh wow, that could happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think consequences have changed too, with the legal system, because when I was younger, if you were charged, that was it. You didn't get a slap on the wrist 26 times, like what happens now. Like you were gone. And even for people, like I'm 59, but we see a police car and we're like, oh shit, have I got my seatbelt on? Oh shit, where's my phone? We straight away go, and maybe there's too much fear in that, but we go straight into oh shit, am I doing the right thing? Because consequences were bloody beaten into us when we were younger. But now, I've worked a lot with youth, and it's like they're not scared at all of the law. It's like, whatever, there's no consequences, I don't care. So it's not unless something bad happens like you that it's a real kick in the bum.
And I talk a lot about my teenage years in my book, but so I was in trouble with the police since I was about 13, from everything from shop theft, criminal damage, and things like that. And it was always a slap on the wrists, and I'd get bailed, or I'd get a good behavior bond, or I'd get a fine or whatever. But yeah, it was always just slap on the wrist, and that's kind of just what I began to think getting in trouble with the law was, as dumb as that sounds. But it's a pretty widely shared view among young people until someone actually gets a big whack. I mean, it's really similar with driving. You get caught drink driving by the police and like you'll lose your license. But you know, that same trip, if that same trip ended in you crashing your car instead and someone was on board, whether or not they were hurt or killed or whatever, like negligently causing serious injury or reckless conduct endangering life, which are predominantly the charges. They're what I was charged and set convicted of. And those are massive charges. And so reckless conduct endangering life, like that's, the person doesn't even have to be injured. It's just what you were doing could have resulted in their death. And so, yeah, like getting pulled over by the police, that could be how it ends. Crashing your car and you're looking at jail time, and it's a massive jump. So, you know, you get pulled over by the police, you get a fine, you lose your license. But if you crash, then you go to jail. Like that's a massive, massive leap. And I think people don't understand just how close they are to a big sentence every time they get in the car drunk.
Yeah, it is. It's just one little snippet away from that. What's it like in jail?
It's not a day camp. It's not a holiday resort. It's a very high pressure environment. It's a very, very volatile place. In a lot of ways, it's not too dissimilar to school. I mean, it's a very close knit community. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows what everyone's doing. So rumors are a really big thing, gossip, but has this underlying tone of just violence. Like that is the go-to for everything, which is just, it's like a jungle really. But all that aside, I mean, it's a lot of loneliness. It's a lot of time spent with all your demons and all your thoughts. A lot of sleepless nights. I mean, and look, that can either do one or two things to you. You can either actually look at everything you've done throughout your life and want to change, or you can kind of look at everything that's happened as it's other people's fault, and that really does happen. But yeah, no, jail was, I mean, for me, it's an incredible duality, because jail was the hardest thing that I've ever had to endure. But at the same time, it saved my life. And I'm not saying that jail is a good place to go and turn your life around, because it's really not, because the greater consensus of people in there are not trying to change their lives. And so when you're really trying to change who you are and to better yourself and to address, you know, past traumas and your addictive tendencies and kind of fix your behavioral patterns, you're really going against the grain in jail. And it makes it a lot more difficult. But yeah, it's crazy how it really did save my life in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like saying one silly decision, but do you think it was one silly decision, or do you think?
No, I have this discussion a lot, and especially with blokes I met in jail. I mean, you know, you've got, you know, career criminals who understand full well that their actions, like jail is a potential consequence of their actions. And some of them treated me with this like sympathy, I guess you would say, where it's like, oh, you know, you fucked up one time and you got this massive whack, whereas this dude, you know, bashed the crap out of his wife and got half of your sentence. And I would say, you know, I actually, it began by me saying like, yeah, no, that's unfair. Like that's pretty messed up. But when I really started to look into what led me to jail, it wasn't one mistake. It was like 8 years of drug abuse and reckless behavior that led me to that point. You know, and it wasn't the first time that I drank and drove. And you know, most of the people that were in jail for drink driving and drink driving related offences, it wasn't their first time either. And that's the thing, like it's I mean, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people that say, oh, you know, we all did it. And it's like, well, that's wrong. Like, that's messed up. Why are we like that? It wasn't at all one slip up, you know. That's kind of, people who say that, they're kind of minimalizing what happened. Like, I was a drug addict and I was a really reckless individual. And so when I think back to the person that I was, like, that was always going to happen. That was absolutely always going to happen. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah. And I think those people that say, oh, I just did it once and this, I think that's also a bloody victim mentality too. Oh, poor me. I just did this, and now look at me. And I think that we've got to get much better at looking at the consequences of our actions. But like we say, maybe we're not good at that. But I'm interested in the book Why the Fallen. So you and your mum wrote the book Why the Fallen. What is that about, and like what can people expect to read?
So this is Why the Fallen. This is mine and my mum's book that we started writing while I was in jail, and I was at the very start of my sentence. And so Why the Fallen started as more or less a confession to my mum. It was the first step in me rebuilding the relationship with my mum. And so I came clean about everything. I started writing about starting when I was like 13, which is when I really started to go off the rails, and everything that happened between then and the crash, I wrote it all down on paper. And so the reason we started doing it was because we kind of both at the same time, we were on the phone one day, and I'd been thinking about, writing my story, just getting all my thoughts and feelings out there, just as a way to pass the time. Because, the first month of my sentence, like, you just don't sleep. You can't stop worrying. And at that point, that's when you really need something to focus your time on. And so Mum said to me on the phone one day, she's like, I really think I want to write a book. And, I said to her, holy crap, I've been thinking the exact same thing. Let's do it. And we got off the phone, and I pretty much ran to my cell and just started writing on loose leaf paper. And the book is about how I went from like a happy young kid, and just fell so far into drug addiction and hanging out with the wrong people and reckless behavior, and how that ultimately led me to jail. But the disposition of that is, it's all written from my mum's perspective as well. So you really see the impact that all of my behavior over a 10-year period, or 8-year period, affected her. Affected her jobs, affected her mental health, financially, everything. And so it gives people like a really good perspective on the impacts of addiction and reckless behavior and the effects that has on people around you. And so obviously it's also about how I really became determined to turn my life around while I was in jail, and what I did while I was in jail to actively turn my life around, the help that I sought while I was in there, and the tools that I've used to really turn my life around.
Oh, that's good. So it's got tools as well. That's terrific. I think it sounds to me like it'd be the perfect book for a teenager to read, because then they do have that window to consequence. They do have a window to see, shit, if I do this, look at the pain that it's causing those I care about. But I think it's also good for the parent to read, because by reading your story, they might just have a window into, oh shit, I think that's happening with little Johnny, and I never saw that before. I never saw those signs before. So
that is exactly what it is. And so the book is available now. You can buy it at our website, www.whythefallen.com. But so the people that have read the book so far and have told us and have given us their feedback have said exactly that reading it from a parent's perspective, you my mum Jane really shows you what to look out for, and ultimately what to do when your child is going off the rails. And a lot of that just has to do with looking after yourself, because like I said earlier, you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. And the best thing that you can do is actually just look after self. And I think that and a lot of the other insights that my mum offers really does help parents, because I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of parents going through this, good people whose kids are just destroying themselves, and there's nothing that the parents can do, and that isn't their fault. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The person that I became is not my mum's fault. You know, and that's a really important thing to note. And yeah, and so the other side of that is younger people that have read my book, whilst they've connected to what I've written, one of the most powerful pieces is when they read my mum's writing, they see their own parents, they see their own family and loved ones, and go, holy crap, like how could I allow myself to put my family through that?
Yeah, wow. And I think it's interesting you talk about self-care, you know, for your mum but it sort of it goes against the natural grain of a mother, because there's very few mothers who can, without a lot of effort, say, I'm going to put myself before my kid. Like that, that's a really, really, really difficult thing for a mother to do, you know, because even though that's the right thing to do, because if I can't look after myself, I'm not going to be there for my kid. 100%. But then the natural instinct is that I'm going to trash myself to save my kid. And that's what most mothers, that's the natural way they go. So that's extremely powerful, you know, for mothers in particular to read that, like, because dads are a little different. Dads just get angry, and I'm not saying that, I'm generalizing, but it's kind of frustrated, like feeling of helplessness just upsets them so much, you know, whereas 100%. The mum sort of goes into warrior mode, and it's like, what can I do? And I am generalizing because I realize that's not exactly right for every single family, but it is.
Look, there's exceptions to the rule, but you know, it is the most common case that, particularly in my case, every time that I'd mess up, you know, growing up, mum would be there to pick up the pieces. And whilst, I mean, that's what a good mother does, at some point or another, continuing to do that is only enabling the behavior. Yeah. And so, yeah, you can always be there to help your kids when they need them, but at some point, like, you've got to actually just not be there, because otherwise they're just going to keep fucking up, coming back to you. You're going to put them back on their feet, and they're going to do it all again, because they know that they've got that like safety blanket there, and it's a subconscious thing. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I get it. I used to be, you know, be a behavior specialist, and the same thing. I used to say that to families. You know, you're actually enabling this behavior, and you've got to draw a tough line. And I never said leave them, but it was always like, you have to draw a tough line, or it's never going to change. But parents, for some reason, see their kid as little Johnny, who's a cute little 3-year-old, cute little 5-year-old who can do no wrong. And, you know, it's a very complex situation, a very tough situation, but at some point you've got to draw a line with your kids and say, well, that you're stepping over the line, and that's just freaking not on. And it's a hard bloody thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a fear in that. You know, if I estrange from you, or desert you, or dump you, how am I going to live with myself if you go out there and completely trash yourself and then end up dead, and I was the one that let you go? How am I going to live with that? So there's this constant hanging on, you know.
See, and that's the thing, like, there's no, when someone's going through what I was going through, just that self-destructive behavior, there is nothing that you can do for them. And so really the only thing left to do is just let them go, right? But the other side of that is, yeah, of course, like if I did kill myself that night, you know, my mum would blame herself for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And so there is no easy way to do it. There is always that risk, but it's unfortunately, yeah, it is a matter of either enabling the behavior or putting your foot down and not allowing the behavior, but the outcome could be the same either way. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Oh, it's a bloody hard line. It's really, really hard, and it's difficult. It's a difficult job being a parent, but it's a difficult job also being a kid, a teenager in today's environment. And I've got all my views about drugs and the bloody drug pushers and but I'm not going to change anything. The only way I can change anything is to bring stories like yours, out into the open and hope that it even saves one person. Because
I tell myself all the time, like to save one is to save the world. And so yeah, I will tell my story to anybody who listens. And from what I've done so far, the public speaking engagements that I've delivered so far, it seems to kind of resonate with some people. But I think, and this is the thing, like, we teach sex education to children in primary school, but then all through middle and senior school, we just say, don't do drugs, don't drink alcohol. And there's no education on, like, let's say responsible drinking, for example, in schools. They say, just don't drink. And then they turn 18 and suddenly they can buy as much alcohol as they want. Yeah. And I think we need to treat, especially in this day and age, we need to treat drug and alcohol education the exact same as sexual education. They don't say anymore in schools, oh, don't have sex, you'll get herpes and die. They say, okay, well, you're going to have sex, let's talk about having it safely. And they need to have that same discussion about alcohol. Yeah. It's okay, you are probably going to drink. Let's talk about what responsible drinking is, and being a responsible friend is not allowing your friends to endanger themselves or other people.
Yeah, agree.
And I think that with that, on top of having conversations about consequential thinking and where, drug and alcohol abuse can end up, I think a combination of that kind of education is the best way to stop these kinds of things happening.
Yeah.
And it is the best preventative measure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do have a crisis, with people's academia not being so great and all that stuff, but we've got a greater crisis of particularly young men suicide and and drug abuse and alcohol abuse. We do need to be putting more of our education into that. And if they haven't learned to, I'm probably going to get my ass kicked for saying this from people, but if they haven't learned to read and write by the time they're a teenager, they're probably not going to. So for God's sake, start teaching them how to live, how to survive, what the consequences are. Don't wreck your life. I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's just frustrating. So, I mean, we've got two teenagers in this house, and it's a constant frustration about what should be taught at home, but when they don't listen, when they do listen, and you can't say don't take drugs when we say it all the time, but that doesn't fucking work. It's anyway.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, teenagers, they know it all.
Yeah. Well, so did you, and so did I.
Yeah, so did I. And then I don't know what happens, but you kind of turn 21 and realize I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Pretty much my mum was right about everything, and that's pretty harrowing. Like, I went from, Mum, you don't know anything, to Mum, you know everything, teach me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, certainly in schools, it's weird because, I mean, we are developing so much as human beings, and we're still using an education system that's quite old now. So people learn differently, people think differently now, and so I think there's different kinds of intelligence that isn't represented or helped in school. I know really smart, intelligent people that don't do well in school but have done very well for themselves outside of school, professionally. So
yeah, school isn't the be all and end all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Plus, we're getting hammered by technology as well, so it's even doesn't even matter what, and the school's not keeping up with that. And it's just smack, 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 all of this IT, the stuff that's just bang, 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 social media that's just, you can't even. But anyway, we could go on about that forever. So, but you're public speaking, so you go and talk in schools and clubs and all that sort of stuff.
At the moment, I haven't done any school presentations yet. I'm in talks at the moment. But I am always available for talks at schools. So I'm doing a lot of presentations for an organization called Veteran Mentors. And so they are all Army veterans, and they run boot camps for troubled teens. They're up in Queensland as well. And so they asked me to come and share my story, because a lot of the blokes that they are helping out, and like they're really helping these kids out. They're doing the exact same things that I were. So that's Veteran Mentors. And I'm also starting to work with YouTube's Youth Road Safety. Melissa and Peter McGuinness, I mentioned their story earlier. They've got like these incredibly powerful messages, and they're out there reaching out to schools and stuff. So yeah, I'm just at the start of this journey, and so I'm still trying to get myself out there and everything. But yeah, I'm really doing my best to try and help, because you know, I've been there and I know. And so I think delivering my story and my messages is one way or another is reaching out to a few people.
I think be very powerful. And I think that you will pay far more attention to somebody who's been through it than somebody who's up there, telling you what to do. So
that's the feedback that I've heard so far.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fantastic, and I hope that people book you. So I've absolutely loved this. It's been fantastic. I mean, it's a horrible story, but it's a great outcome, and potentially the fabulous part of all this is that you're going to save lives. And I don't even think potentially needs to be there, because I think you will. There's no doubt about it that you will. So if people want to get hold of you and follow your story, I want them to follow you anyway, just so that they can see, positive outcomes of shitful situations. But if people want to book you and all that kind of stuff, where can they find you?
So you can either reach out to me on my own social medias. It's just Zac Jones, ZACJONES, or through our book business page, Why the Fallen, our website, whythefallen.com. You can contact us through there. Our email address is info.whythefallen@gmail.com. There's 100 ways to reach out to me, guys. So please do.
Yeah, fantastic. Yep. And I'll put all those in the show notes. And Zac, I've absolutely loved this. And thank you for not only thank you that you came through the other side. No, and if jail had to do that to you, then I'm glad it did. But just thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability, and your willingness to help other people, because we need more of you in the world. That's for sure.
Thank you very much. I'm really humbled by that.
I really loved having you. So let's stay in touch, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Zac. See ya.